Yeah,
Okay.
welcome. So
How-
you're in Vancouver, I believe.
I am, yes. Yes, I love
Oh,
it on the coast. hmm
nice
Amazing.
there. Nice there today.
Yes, currently, yes. You
Good.
never know.
Good. So, like, maybe give me a bit of a like. I have some of your background, but I'm just curious. How did you get into this? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, so why am I a dating and love
Yeah,
coach? Or
yeah,
how did
yeah.
I get into that? Yeah, great question. So my background's a counselor. I've been doing it for years, and I moved into the coaching world. It's a little bit different than counseling. You can give
Right.
more direction and more consulting and guiding and more action based. But how I specifically got into this niche industry, you could almost say, was on a more of a personal level. I was helping women find confidence and how to find themselves and where we start to lose who we are. And where I found a lot of us women struggle, and probably most people, is in love and in our relationships. We've got it all dialed in other areas of our life, but sometimes that specific area. And when it came to my own personal life, I was out of a relationship that I thought was going to go what I call the distance, marriage, baby, kids,
Okay.
everything. And I was like, what the heck? Like, how the hell did this happen that it ended when
Yeah.
everyone around me seemed to have it figured out? And I was like, I got to get this figured. Oh, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I master relationships? I've got every other area figured out in my mind. And so I really went into this whole discovering what it is about that makes relationships last. How do the opposite sex think? Like, how do men think versus women? How do men commit versus women? How do
Mhm.
they pursue different ways of being with somebody? And so it really dived into this aspect of this. And then as I was coaching, it just kind of came in that that's the topic a lot of women and men came to me for. And so that's where I niched into it.
Did you when looking? No, because you opened the door. Looking back at that, the impetus or that kind of seminal thing that got you direction. Did you figure it out? Did you figure out why it didn't go the way you expected?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. There's a lot of layers to it. And it's what I help a lot of people with, men or women, is a lot of times we look at relationships through the lens of what we grew up in the dynamic and our childhood experiences. And there's lots of language and literature around our attachment style, secure, anxious, avoidant. And that plays a huge impact on how we perceive love. And then a lot of our past relationships, how we processed endings or how we saw ourselves in that experience. We start to create beliefs and we start to trap emotions in our body. And if it's unprocessed, we take that right into our next relationship. And we're surprised that it doesn't work out, but it's usually because we haven't really healed from those other experiences. Like,
Hmm.
have you ever heard the term like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm dating the same person again?
Yeah,
Right?
of course.
Different body, perhaps,
Yeah,
different look, but same personality traits. Or I'm dating one of my parents, or I'm in a relationship with one of my parents. Like, this seems so much like my mother or my father.
right.
It's because we attract a lot of those exact similar characteristics and traits because we're familiar to that. But that's not necessarily who we want to be with in relationship, but it's what we know. And so
Yeah.
until we start acknowledging that, recognizing and breaking some of those patterns, we will keep continuing that pattern.
Do you think I have two daughters and a son, and they're both well into the dating age.
Yeah.
Do you think some of it is a leading question a little bit? Do you think some of it is genetic at all? Like, do you think there's a genetic
Oh,
component to it?
yeah, you could definitely look at some elements of personality traits, right?
Yeah,
Because you can have three children raised in the exact same home and they all
yeah.
have a different experience, right? And
That's what we're experiencing.
yes, and you're like, how did you see that situation unfolding? Or how did you interpret that comment to mean this? So you
Right.
could look at it genetically, you could look at it as personality. It looks at like environmental versus nature, nurture versus environment, right?
Hmm.
Nature nurture, that element, absolutely, there's a lot of layers to that piece, but it still comes from that person's internal world of how they then approach dating or relationships.
Yeah. Do you think there's like and I see it because I have young girls in my family, and they're really anxious to be dating and feeling that sense of belonging and being needed and that sort of thing. Is there a healthy way to get into it? Like, is there a healthy way where maybe young people who are just learning about themselves can, dive in, but not be so like, I guess here's the background to the question. You get kids, they dive in and they're in their first also, let's say half a dozen relationships or lower, and then suddenly you've got someone who likes you, and then suddenly you're probably doing what you were saying you did originally. This is going in the right direction. I see
Yeah.
kids, I see marriage, I see vacations together.
Mhm.
And then the underpinnings disappear.
Yeah.
And then you're into relationship 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And I guess I've always wondered, I've probably done a bad job as a parent and just not really set the kids up properly for what's the proper expectation. And then how do you deal with the reality that your hormones are just telling you what to do? They're just taking the gray matter and just kind of saying, you got to do this, and you got to be in a relationship, and you got to have kids. And
Sure.
I don't know, like, what's the right thing to
You
do?
asked many questions in that.
Yeah, I know.
Many questions. I'm trying to think where to start. Okay, so one, I don't think you did a bad job as parenting, right? I think all parents do the best we know. And like you said, you have 3 kids with 3 different personalities of how they're perceiving relationships and what they're learning from your relationship and the dynamic. And it's at a very unconscious level. We get imprinted from 0 to 7 of the world around us. And we build beliefs and systems on that. And then we start adding evidence to hold that to be true. Even if it's not actually true, our mind thinks it is.
Right.
That in place. Then when you look at how to enter into relationships, when you're looking at someone under 20 or even 25 and under, they're so influenced by their friends. And so the kind of parental influence kind of is off to the side, and you have a lot of friend influence and societal influence. And now you have social media influence. So it can skew a lot of what relationships should be, how to pursue it. And a lot of head game and drama can start to show up. Absolutely. Then you add in, like you said, that hormones that get flooded. And so it really skews what real love is or what one really wants to experience. And you could also apply that in the adult version too, where we're flooded by hormones as well, but not at that teenage level where you're unable to process. We get flooded with oxytocin hormones. And so a high level of chemistry. And so when you've heard of that honeymoon stage where you meet somebody, and in that honeymoon stage, you're flooded with all these hormones that are like, this is amazing. I can't believe I found somebody. Oh my God. And it's familiar and it's exciting. And we miss red flags, or we don't really filter if they're really compatible for us. It's because that hormone's being released in our body and we have a lot of chemistry, but maybe not a lot of compatibility. But we're not going to see that until that hormone starts to dissipate. Yes. So when you're looking at young people, they don't even have that languaging at that point. What I think young people miss out on, and it shows up in much later in life as well, is we don't know how to end something well.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And I think that's a really tricky part is like, we don't know how to complete. So breakups become big drama, or we got ghosting, or we've got like, there's so many terms around it, but we just don't know how to be accountable to how I feel and be okay that I might hurt someone's feelings, but own that, but not be responsible for it.